Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tournament of Champions. Off to a good start. Welcome to PaizoCon 2021. Hope everyone's having a good time. I know we're all excited to talk about the Ruby Phoenix Tournament Adventure Path. My name is Patrick Rini. I was the developer on that adventure path that we'll be talking about today. And with me today, I have James Case, who was one of the authors. He's also an editor at Paizo. I have Patrick Hurley, who's an editor, was the lead editor on the project. And I have Yvonne Shao, who was an author. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Fists of the Ruby Phoenix. It's the latest adventure path for the Pathfinder second edition, and we're really excited to jump right into it. So yeah, let's check out the cover art for the for Pathfinder 167, which is the next one coming out. Should be dropping in stores soon. Yeah, this is the cover scene for the second volume. It's called Ready Fight. It's the it takes the player characters from the pre-qualifier, which was the first adventure in this series, to the grand tournament itself, the actual Ruby Phoenix tournament. And this, for those not in the know, it's basically a once per decade world tournament where the best fighters from around Golarion come and duke it out in the grand arena for a shot at the grand prize, which is one of the treasures from Haojin, the Ruby Phoenix's massive vault. So she has all sorts of artifacts, and whoever wins the tournament gets one. Yeah, we're really excited to work on this particular project. I personally was, because it's kind of a big piece of Pathfinder lore. We first touched on Haojin and the Ruby Phoenix and stuff like a decade ago. That was kind of one reason we wanted to launch back into this is because it's been 10 years since the once per decade tournament. So, it was really exciting to jump into this lore and canon that fans really love. We explored more about Haojin and her story in Pathfinder Lost Omens Legends, and revealed that she has returned to the material plane. So it was kind of a big deal, that this is the first Ruby Phoenix tournament held in her name that she's present for. So it's going to be a special one. The AP starts off with a bang. If we want to check out the Triceratops image, you start in. It's not just restrained to Goka this time. You start the adventure path on the Isle of Banmu, which is one of the islands in the archipelago of Minata, which is this island nation in Tian Sha, and you're basically duking it out, with the elements, with each other. There's all sorts of teams, and it's kind of a free for all as you try and gather enough points to qualify for the tournament itself. It's kind of a survival, can you survive the island long enough to get to the tournament itself, kind of thing. And so the island is clearly not uninhabited. It's got all sorts of angry denizens like this Triceratops, who is not so happy to see the swashbuckler on her island. So if you manage to get through that pre-qualifier, then you get to go to the tournament itself. And the tournament take this year, as every year for the past 300 years, as every decade, it takes place in the city of Goka. Awesome, yeah. And here's the map of that. Yvonne, you actually wrote the article on Goka and designed this map. Could you talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
Sure. So, making Goka, it's actually quite a daunting task because it is also one of the largest cities on Golarion, and it's almost about the same size as Absalon, possibly even a little bit larger. I'm not really sure about the scale now. And going into it, there was quite a lot to consider because Goka has a very long history because the history of the city itself is intrinsically tied to the history of the whole continent of Tianxia as well, because it appeared a long time ago, and then for thousands of years, it's always kind of been there also. And so it's kind of seen through the different empires So from the likes of Longhua, which is a little bit closer, and then there's also the Empire of Shu before that. And so going into Goka, the first thing I kind of did was basically I did an outline of all the different things that happened in Tuansha and kind of thought about how are these historical events going to affect the city and what things are going to still like what things from those empires are still going to be part of Goka today and what things would change. And so that was kind of where I started with creating Goka and going on from there. Mm-hmm.
What were yeah, I agree. It's daunting to make it's really daunting to make a city that is thousands of years old because there's not really any examples from real life to draw from. I mean, like
Yeah.
when we're talking like 5,000 years, right? You know, it's not just a couple, but yeah,
The whole
it's
fantasy scale of time there.
yeah. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, some of these buildings are like ancient, you know, some of them are new, and like you said, like it's kind of like Absalom in that like people from all over Tian Sha and all over the world come to this place, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, were there any like particular like goals or you know, did you have any like primary objectives while designing the city? Was there one thing you were like, I really want this to hit?
Yeah, there definitely was. One of the things that I kind of picked with Goka was I wanted to have a metropolitan feeling, and I wanted to be the sort of a modern modern like metropolis, except in the fantasy setting. so, so minus the electricity, minus the technology, I kind of want to retain the feeling of this is a very fast-paced city where a lot of things are changing every single day. Like you can close the window from one day and then open it, and then it's like, hey, that building was not there yesterday or a week ago, and which
Yeah.
happens a lot in a lot of fast-paced like building metropolis. A building will be gone, and then
hmm
next month you'll be like, that is a new skyriser that was not there before.
Yeah, I
And
think that
so
that definitely.
And so Goga kind of has that feeling in the sense of there are events happening every day. The people there are fast paced. There's a lot of trends, and so and from the cultural aspect, I kind of went into sort of what kind of entertainment would you see, and I kind of alluded to a lot of trends that we would see modern day that changes a lot. So kind of like K-pop and fashion and like what is popular right now and what is being considered like the thing that everybody's
hmm
into. And so that was
Yeah.
I
definitely
definitely.
one. Yeah.
I definitely remember reading through the Gazetteer a bit
Mhm.
later, and I was like, "Oh, there's all this cool stuff here," but it definitely captured that like really metropolitan feel. But I do remember reading through it and seeing a thing where there's like an opera house from Hwanggot, which is the part of our world that takes a lot of inspiration from Korea, and it was like they have troops of performers who make like popular music,
Oh
and I was like,
no.
yes, and I was like, I see where you're going with this here. So, but there's like
Yeah.
a lot of like nice little spins on that. There's like, the clothing fashion and a bunch of areas.
Hmm.
So I thought it was really cool to see kind of that there's clearly stuff from all over Tiansha in it. Like that felt very
hmm
cool.
Hmm.
And it feels
Yeah.
like it really feels like its own thing too. There's so many elements of it that I'm like, I don't know where, you know, this would be true necessarily in the real world or whatever, but like one aspect of it is like the gambling aspect. Like everyone's always gambling on all sorts of
Hmm.
things, like, you know, betting, you know, is it going to rain today? You know, betting like, you know, are they going to put a skyrise there, you know, or whatever. You know, they bet on when the waterfall on the north side of the city is going to thaw after the winter or something like that, you know, so like they make
Yeah.
bets on the exact day. I love that cultural element, and there's so many things like that in the article, and yeah, I think
Hmm.
people are going to really love, you know, Goka. I think it's I want to ask each of you actually, you know, if you had to, if you were an adventurer, what would be your first stop in Goka? Where would you go to first, you think?
Well, I
Ooh,
was
that's
gonna
hard to
say. Oh, go
say.
ahead.
No, you go ahead first because I need to take some time to think.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah. So I think for me personally, I mean, it would probably be there's an island. It's like called the Island of Fortune or the Red Dragon Island or something near the top, and it's like this total like pleasure island where there's just casinos and lavish parties all hours of the day. There's fireworks every night, you know, and they make bets on, you know, what order the fireworks will be on or whatever. But it just sounds like a total hoot. Yeah, I think it's somewhere near Dragon Head District. Yeah, there's just a lot of nightlife, and I don't know. I could really go for being outside right now and being among the people. I don't know. I guess I'm really craving that for some reason this past year.
Yeah, I was probably gonna say. Oh, you got yours.
Okay, thanks. I would probably pick the Never Ending Market actually, because it's a place that you can go really early in the morning and see one thing, and then throughout the day it changes. It sells some things on certain days. It sells some things at certain hours, and so it's sort of like a place where you can just go in the morning and just stay for 24 hours and basically get your fill of everything. From food to magic items to if you're the type that cook, you can get fresh vegetables there. And so it's just a place that's convenient, I would say, to kind of just get a feeling of, okay, what does Goka have available on the surface in like just everyday life.
Totally.
It was. I will say the whole city. It was difficult to edit because it was so interesting. I kept like forgetting I'm supposed to be editing, and just like, oh really? What's here? Oh my gosh! And I was like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be editing this, but it's so good. And I think for me it'd be a tie between the Never-Ending Market and then watching the flying the chariot races, the dragon chariot,
the Drake
races.
races.
Drakes,
Yes,
yeah.
the Drake races. That was that sounded so cool.
You got one, James?
I was probably also going to say Dragonhead. I just like the idea of this like big place that's kind of out on the water in the harbor. You know, I like being near the water. I like that it's a you know, it's right at a port, and that's why you get all of the city growing up there. There's also like, I don't really know what's there, but there's a spot that's like an island in the middle of the river between, and I usually like that kind of thing. I don't quite remember what's there, but I like that element. I remember I wrote one of the promo fictions for this, and I remember seeing the thing about that Yvonne put in about gambling and how it's like very well regulated, and I was like, well, Abadar, you know, who's our god of like, among other things like banking and wealth and stuff, like, you know, he has a big presence there, so that makes sense. So I tried to put like a little line in where it's like very well regimented, and then like I think the lead character is like, yeah, I want to go relax in a hotel by the ocean after this. So that's what I'm about.
That sounds good. Yeah. You know, one of the biggest, obviously, I think one of the biggest things to do in Goka right now, especially, would be to check out the Grand Arena, though, right? So, you know, let's check out that image. The Ruby Phoenix tournament itself takes place in this Grand Arena, which, you know, as you might expect, is a pretty, you know, a typical classic, I would say, fighting arena that you might find. You know, it's got stadium seating all around it. It's got a tile floor, you know, flat terrain, so everyone can easily see the fight, and nobody has an unfair advantage based on their position. And this is where I would say most or about half of the fights take place. But you know, we wanted to make sure that it didn't feel like the same fight over and over again, right? So this image right here shows one of the variant forms of the Grand Arena. And I know, Patrick Hurley, that you enjoyed this one in particular, editing this one, because it kind of does take Pathfinder and turn it on its head, so to speak, or turn it on its side, maybe. You know, this one, it was a lot of fun to develop and think about. This is basically it's kind of a sphere, not a sphere, I'm sorry, it's a cylinder. So this shows a wraparound map in the lower right hand corner there. You can see like a top overview, and what you'll be doing is, you're looking at the battlefield from the side rather than from top down. And I think this will really throw some players for a loop and like really kind of make you think about the game in a different way. But in another way, it actually works kind of seamlessly, really, because it's still a 5-foot grid. You still have 2 dimensions. One of the dimensions is height instead of depth, so it's really very similar, and it didn't take that much effort to translate it. It just it kind of gives it a very fun, like video gamey feel almost, right? Like a side scroller kind of thing. Kind of evokes, classic 2D fighting games.
I were a large monkey at the top of it. I would throw some barrels.
It would be perfect for that.
I like about that.
I also noticed that
yeah,
there
and
was upside down spikes.
Oh yeah, don't fall on the spikes. Yeah.
Yeah. But
It's
I mean,
like,
it's a higher level AP anyways. So by that point, most people can probably jump high. They can probably at least hover a little bit. So like, it works.
Right. And so that was kind of like how do you make the fights interesting when everyone can fly, or when, they have potions of flying and stuff like that at this level. And so, there are basically exhibition fights within the tournament. So there are main fights, which take place on the grand arena, and then there are exhibition fights, which are like these extra things that you get big prizes and money and acclaim if you win. And so this is one of those exhibition fights, and it has special rules. One of the special rules for this one is you have to touch this like once every round. So yeah, you could fly away and blast the whole place with a fireball, but your next turn you better touch it again. You better hope someone doesn't stasis you or slow you or something like that, because if you don't touch it in a given round, then you're disqualified. So it was really fun to play with that. And go ahead.
Oh no, the thing I loved about that it reenacted the video game thing of if you fall off a platform you're dead. Like it was just that's it.
Absolutely, yeah. If you fall off, then it's like, oh, you better get back to it. If somebody knocks you, farther away than you can run to the next round, then you're toast. So, so it's those kinds of exhibition fights and those kinds of like spicing up the tournament with different kinds of things that I think players will really remember. And I know it was a lot of fun to develop and kind of think about these things, right? So someone mentioned Drake racing earlier. I would be remiss if that didn't show up in somewhere in this AP, right? So there's an exhibition match about that, and there's all sorts of things like cage matches, and the list goes on. So another aspect I thought that was so cool about this adventure path is that in addition to a wide range of fighting locations and maps and stuff, there's all kinds of maps. Like there's so many battle maps in this AP. I was it's hard to keep them all straight. There's also a huge cast of characters. So if we can look at the first image there of the character, this is one of the main rivals that your team will be facing throughout all 3 volumes. His name is Tino Tung. His stories. He's a monk of Aurori, kind of a classic martial artist, wants to really perfect his body and train his mind and stuff like that. And his team is called Tino's Toughest, and they are these affable, gracious, really friendly fighters who the PCs meet really early on. Like it's like one of the first things you do in the first volume is he's like, hey fellow adventurers, would you like to friendly spar? And what I really wanted to achieve with Tino's Toughest in particular was that they're here to have a good time, right? They're here at the tournament not to beat up, senselessly beat up everyone or whatever. They're here to like test themselves and see if they have what it takes to win this prize. And I kind of wanted to instill that tone right from the get-go. I wanted to, I think if a table wants to play gritty and grim, tournament, that's going to be easy. You can definitely do that, sure. But that's not what Tino's Toughest is here for. They're here for a good time, and I felt like that example would help GMs and players get into that mindset if that's what they want to do. and along with him, he and his team provide a really great foil for all sorts of other villains. This one, this is thankfully not another fighting team, but
No,
that would
no,
be a
no.
little
Good luck.
one-sided, I think. But talking about all this tournament stuff, I'd be remiss to say, of course, everything can't go according to plan, right? I mean, if you've seen a tournament arc in a uh, any story
What
or a
what
game, or
tournament arc goes all according to plan?
Yeah.
None of
right,
them.
I can't think. Yeah, that wouldn't be a very interesting tournament, right? If you knew how it was going to end. If it's like, oh yeah, pack it up, final fight's over, you're done.
Good fight. See you guys.
Yeah, good. See you next year.
Meet in 10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, totally. Get better. Yeah. So there's definitely some surprise folks that show up, including that image there. I mean, I think I've already kind of said this on a different stream, but that's King Mogaru, who is one of our kaiju from first edition. It was established a long time ago, and he makes a special guest appearance at the tournament, much to everyone's dismay.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about having the side characters is I think it'd be easy with something like what is a fighting tournament AP to just have it be like, okay, it's 4,000 combats consecutively, and it's nice having the characters around to like talk with and kind of build them out. I know a lot of them show up in the first one, and then they continue to recur over the course of the AP. So that just kind of it's nice to have some characters there so that you have some role play opportunities between punching people in the arena.
Totally, and
Yeah.
since you wrote the third volume, James, I remember you had a ton of great set role playing encounters with all the different teams. They each really felt like their own thing because it's a worldwide tournament, right? So everyone comes from different parts of the world with different motivations. There's people there, there's people there from the lands of the Linorm Kings who want to. That team's called Winter's Roar, and they're these hardened Vikings who are they're the grim, serious ones. If that's
They're
what
the
you want to do.
Skyrim.
Totally, yeah. They're there because they're training to fight a Linorm later. So they're like, this is our practice round. But there's also, if we can see the image, I think it's the one after Mogaru. It's of Mafika Ayuari, who is a character from the Magambia Academy, which he's going to be a character in Strength of Thousands. So it was fun to play with different characters from other adventure paths, even, and kind of show all parts of Golarion, not just Tian Sha, not just Avestan or Garoon, but all over, right? So I remember, a lot of your set role playing encounters, James, were just delightful because you really got a feel for what these teams were all about, and they talk different. They speak differently. They have their own agendas. Yeah.
Yeah, Luis did a really good job introducing the roster in book one, and then David Ross, who did Ready Fight, had all of their combat blocks and that kind of thing. So I think it lets you get a sense for the different teams there. And there's, I think, Patrick Hurley, I think you might know a little bit better, but there's a tournament bracket that you can go along with depending on
Yes.
who wins what. But yeah, the speakers to the wins they're the Magambia team. They're fun. They're kind of like a bigger team because they're not necessarily all quite as strong because some of them are students and such. So that's nice too. Whereas there's another team that's 3 people who are really, really buff or something. So I definitely wanted to when I got the outline from you, Patrick Greening, I was like, okay, the first 2 are kind of more of a classic tournament arc. The third one is feeling very JRPG-y. And one of the things that I like about that is when the characters you've met previously come back and they've all either changed or they're if you beat them the first time, then they're really angry with you. And maybe if you had you fought and it was to a draw, but it was a good fight, maybe they respect you more. So I definitely liked kind of calling back to them a lot. And it was nice because I didn't have to make up all the new characters. I only had to follow the map that Luis and David left me. So that was nice.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about the bracket a little bit, Patrick Hurley?
Oh yeah. So one of the reasons I was excited for this was I was captain of my wrestling team in high school, so I used to go. I mean, it wasn't quite. There was no floating platforms, but I used to go to plenty of tournaments, and this was the first time because there's a bracket you have to follow, and there's different seeds for different teams, and you know it. We had to. It was the first time I had to use my wrestling knowledge of like, oh yeah, okay, the third seed versus the fifth seed, and if this seed wins, then this, and I was like, wow, I actually get to use this for editing Paizo stuff. I never thought that would happen. But it was really cool because I think there's enough upsets, and it doesn't, it's not inevitable. I think what happens while the players fight, like there's cool outcomes no matter what. I thought it was very, very well organized. So
And it was one of the things that was a real challenge with that, but I think was so exciting and it's going to be so fun. Is it's a double elimination bracket, right? So even if you lose, like that way, if you lose, you're not out. You're in the losers bracket, which basically all the teams that lost in the winners bracket have to fight in the losers bracket, and then at the end, the winner of the losers bracket gets to fight the winner of the winners bracket. There's a whole graph. Don't worry about it. But what's cool about
thoroughly
this, I think.
checked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. What's great about that though is that no two game tables will have the same exact experience. I think, right? It's kind of takes into consideration. Well, if you lose this match, then you go and do these exhibition matches. If you lose this match, you go here. It'll be totally different. You could run this AP, 5 times and have 5 totally different outcomes. And I think that's one of the coolest appeals of it.
Yeah.
Especially that first issue, you could run it 100 times and have
Yeah, a whole
Yeah.
whole island. Yeah.
I do see in chat, Ezekiel is asking, is Mogaru statted out? And I think that, Yvonne, I know you've done some work with Kaiju there, but I don't think you did Mogaru specifically for this one, but I think maybe you can talk about how, the Kaiju, maybe they're not statted per se, but maybe you can give some insight into how it works.
Yeah, that's I think I did it for that's Monsters of Myth instead, so that's
Yeah.
upcoming as well. And so kaiju's, because they're just so huge and um, they're basically impossible to fight almost in a way because they're basically almost an environmental hazard to a certain extent. So you can't really see them as um, uh, creature of like probably even level 30 or 40. You have to think of them as they're walking natural disasters. And so the way that we're dealing with them now is, instead of standing them out with HP or ability scores, we're actually just running out what abilities they have as environmental hazards instead. And so with Mogaru, I believe he still has his some of his old abilities from Pathfinder first edition. So he still has his laser beams. He still has his fireballs. And there are also some other new abilities also upcoming. So I'm going to leave that as a surprise for now.
Yeah, I don't want to get too ahead on Luis and Eleanor's product, but there is some cool stuff. And like you said, it's not like we switched to second edition and suddenly what Mogaru fundamentally is changed. I mean, he's still a giant fire-breathing lizard, right? So still got that.
Yeah, it's a really exciting way to tell that story, I think, because that's totally that's exactly right. Yvonne, is like it's a walking natural disaster, right? So you play it as a natural disaster, right? Yeah, it's really excited for, and that might be the case in Goka. Who knows? I mean, he doesn't show up and hand out candy. We'll just say that. But we do have plenty of new. I mean, it wouldn't be Adventure Path volumes if they didn't have new monsters. And let's check out the Jiangshi and the Bulgay. Yeah, this is actually 2 monsters. It might look like 3, but we have the Jiangshi on the left, which is I can't remember the other nickname for them. Hopping vampire, is that
Yeah.
right? And yeah. Yeah, and so these both are from mythology, and we got to lean in and stat up and write about different mythological creatures and put them in Golarion, and that was one of the coolest. That's one of my favorite things ever is writing monsters. So getting to choose monsters from different mythologies, like the Bulgay is from Korean mythology, and it's kind of this a story of a dog that tries to bite the sun. I think it has to do with lunar eclipses or something like that. And it tries to bite the sun, but it burns its mouth. And then it tries to bite the moon, but then it freezes. I think that's kind of the angle we went with anyway. So it's this duality kind of monster where it's like partially fire, partially cold. It's kind of a double demon dog kind of thing. That was a really cool one. And there's tons more. There's gumihos, which are kind of like
They're kind of related. Yeah, they're kind of a similar thing to kitsune. I think they all kind of the Japanese, Chinese, and Korean versions all kind of intertwine a little bit historically.
Yeah.
But Joanne Hong did a lot of the monsters in the back. She had some like really cool takes on stuff. I remember the Bulgay especially. I was just like, it has this like fire and ice kind of almost stance switch type thing, which I thought was really cool. There's some other ones, like the Gumiho is one of them. I know it has like it has a note about its like marble that it stores all of its knowledge in and that kind of thing that I thought was really cool. I'm always a big fan of seeing like what the classic mythology says, and then it's like, well, how can I turn that into D6s and checks and that kind of thing? And there's a lot of really cool ones in here. Patrick, Curly, did you see any?
Yeah, go for it.
Did you see any like monsters or anything in the back matter that stuck out?
There were a lot, and it's funny because I can picture it's the names that escape me, but the fiery sparrow birds.
Oh, it's like the three-legged crows. Yeah.
Yep. And there was they weren't necessarily combatants, but the beautiful kind of knowledge creatures with the very long necks, but the human heads, and they had like a bird's body, and so I can remember the name, the and the myth behind it. What?
Yeah, that's the Inmyeonjo, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. That one was also Joanne. That one's really cool.
Because that one, if you want to see a picture of kind of like what it was based on, it was they did an awesome like giant puppet version of it at the Winter Olympics in Korea a couple of years ago.
I'm not aware of that.
Oh yeah, it's spooky. It's cool.
I'll have to Google that.
Yeah, and the three-legged crow is the Sanzuwu. That's what that one's called. And that's from Chinese mythology. It's like a fire. It's like a sun crow. Yeah.
It's a sun crow.
I couldn't resist putting in a piece in mine where you fight up to 9 of them because that's how that works. And there's like a check before. There's like a skill gauntlet before it, and basically,
yes,
the depending on how you do on the skill gauntlet, you have to fight more and more of the Sanzu. And I was just like, 9 is the appropriate number of these to fight. So
yeah, it's a weird one because it's like a high-level small creature, which there aren't many of. But
need more.
It's like this. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like a little bit bigger.
I don't know.
Than
I'm almost more afraid to fight something that's like level 15 plus and is this big. I'm like, how would I even hit it?
Especially a crow, right? I mean, we get a lot of crows in Seattle, and those things are pretty mean. If you happen, I don't know. I think my hair, since COVID started, it's starting to look more and more like a nest. I think, or something, because I am a target for crows around here, so I'm particularly afraid of these monsters.
Yvonne, was there? I don't know if you've gotten a chance to check out any of the monsters or anything, but if there's any that stuck out to you, or
the one that stuck out to me the most, I can't talk about because it spoils the entire adventure.
Okay, well, then there's something cool in it, and we won't talk about it.
Yep.
There is. I'm like, okay, I know you played a video game, and you probably played one video game, and that's why this is here. But oh my god, it makes me like it made me go and think. Okay, so when I get to this creature, what background music am I going to play?
You'll have
Okay.
you'll have your pick from a
Yeah, it's
number of
like
games,
which
right?
one do I pick?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
there's that selection of music that you can pick, and yeah.
Yeah, there was a
Well,
lot of, as you mentioned earlier, James. There was a lot of JRPG inspirations for some aspects of the high level play, right? I mean, yeah, it gets far out, which is part of the fun. Yeah.
I was
yeah.
also impressed. Each of the side teams, James, and yours, all of their little arcs or desires can be completed, which I thought was kind of neat. Like it was like a very like it's not just the player characters; everyone has a story if the game goes that way. So.
Hmm.
I think if there's something that we've noticed about putting in things is that people always get really attached to characters you didn't expect them necessarily to get attached to. So I was like, I have a team from the I think my personal favorite team of the ones is the Arcadia team a lot. I really like them. I think they're a lot of fun. But somebody else may like the Viking team more. So I was just like, well, if people like the Viking team, I want them to have something to look forward to. So yeah,
It felt like it definitely felt like side quests, kind of in that regard. It's like, oh, you can find out what makes each of these characters tick, and there's a lot of the characters too. I mean, it's like 8 teams or like 7. There's the player characters, and then there's 7 other teams. So 7 times 3 or 4 is that's a lot of NPCs. So yeah, GMs, thankfully there is an article in the back of the first one that talks all about these, so you can make a flow chart to keep them all straight or whatever. But hopefully the players only latch
yeah,
onto a couple, maybe not all 30, but
yeah. It's kind of like you were saying, like you can adjust the tone a lot,
hmm.
and I think part of that is maybe you want to run it really gritty, or maybe you just want to do the PC rules where like if people get knocked out, you just say, well, they can stabilize, and like you're at a giant thing, I'm sure they have a medic's tent to like feed you healing potions after the fight.
Hmm.
But kind of in the same way there, if like everybody latches on to one team, then that's the one that the GM can also give a little more focus to as well. And I think
Totally.
Luis and David have built out their personalities a lot, so I think it kind of builds over the course of the AP.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this AP, especially is like really variable, and I think you could run it, yeah, like the tournament as well as
So much
everything else. You
fun.
could run it, and it'd be different every time. Yeah.
Mhm.
There is, let's see, I do want to throw up the last image before we head to Q&A, because, we're entering a land of supernatural stuff. It's high level. By the time you're in the 3rd volume, you're 18th level or something like that. And all sorts of crazy stuff starts happening. So, I really, really enjoyed working on this project with all y'all, and I thought it was so cool to explore Tian Sha, this supernatural continent where dragons are walking around doing stuff, messing with people all the time. Yeah, I really hope people enjoy Fist of the Ruby Phoenix. Do we have any questions from Twitch, James?
Let me take a look.
Thank you. I don't know how to do these newfangled things. Twitch.
um, Kisne Warlock is saying, are there any competitors returning from the original Oney Ruby Phoenix tournament? Since I know this is based on a module from Oney, so
Yep. As a matter of fact, there are a couple return characters, and they either reprise their role or kind of. So we have like characters like Amara Lee, who was the venture captain of the Lantern Lodge back when that was the thing in Pathfinder Society. So if you played a lot of Pathfinder Society back in the day and you miss Amara Lee, she still lives in Goka, and you'll get to hang out with her. And also another character that springs to mind is Gamwai, who was I think basically kind of one of the main villains from the first module, and maybe it's time to give him a second chance. I don't know. We all make mistakes. Don't worry about Gamwai. He's a nice guy now. He's just trying to make right, and he got a job working for the tournament. And yeah, I think people will really enjoy. If you've played those past products, you'll get to make a lot of connections, which I think is really cool.
Another thing is you can have a potential origin that your character fought in the tournament 10 years ago, right? Like that's one of the potential
the
backgrounds you
background.
can pick. Yeah.
Yeah, in the player's guide, yeah, there's all sorts of different player backgrounds, because this is the first AP we've done that starts at not at first level. It starts at 11th level. So that was a really interesting part of this whole project was how do you start a story at 11th level and finish at 20th level? We finish at 20th level all the time, but when you start at 11th level, it's like, well, you can't just assume you're the daughter of a farmer and the farm burned down and you became an adventurer. That's not going to fly. So your 11th level, you can pick from these new player backgrounds, and they kind of are they're definitely more like you fought in the tournament last time, you weren't strong enough, you've trained for 10 years, you're ready to make good on your promise to be the winner this year. And other, yeah, exactly. You've done the One Punch Man. You've really like trained your body and mind for and
It's
so that
certainly
was
like,
really cool.
yeah, I think like the concept of like world's greatest martial arts tournament is kind of the thing that works better when you're starting not at level 1. I mean, maybe if you wanted to do it at level 1, you'd spend the first 3, training or something. But I like that we're starting at level 10, because honestly, if you're level 1, what are you doing? Going to Danger Island and fighting martial artists and running away from giant terror birds or whatever.
Watch out for Cthulhu's.
Oh yeah. It wouldn't be a tropical island without Cthulhu too. Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question here. TRDJ has I think 2 that kind of go together. One is, how important do you think it is for the PCs to win every match and ensure that everything's to death so that they can keep going? And if they don't necessarily want to have multiple combats every session, is there a way that they could maybe adjust that?
We kind of touched on this a little earlier with the double elimination bracket style, but it's absolutely, I'd say, depending on your GM's leniency and stuff like that, it's not critical at all for you to win, every fight. Presumably, you might start stretching credulity a little bit if you lost 4 fights and they're like, oh, the team, dropped out or whatever. This team got sick. They can't fight, so you get to go in again. That might start to feel a little weird after the first couple times, but you can totally lose 1 or even 2 of the fights, and still the story still makes sense, and it still makes sense even if you don't necessarily take part in the tournament in the way that it's written too. You could ostensibly, kind of glaze over the fights if you don't want to do those, or you could summarize them, kind of roll a couple, performance checks and stuff like that to kind of skip over them. I think there's suggestions built into the text, about how to represent crowd favor and stuff like that, and so you could pretty easily just hand wave a lot of that if you're more into the role playing side of stuff. I think there's like all these characters and locations and stuff like that, there's plenty of ground for just role playing if that's what you're into. I really like to role play as well, so I think you could easily do like 1 fight per session and then have everything else that day be kind of like around the fight, hanging out at the tavern with the team you just fought later that night and stuff. There's all these places and settings and situations you can be in. There's events that split up the fights for sure. That's something we considered a lot with this one, is it's like, how do we make it not feel like a series of 20 fights, right? So that's good question.
And I think there's some stuff where you could just the there's a lot of stuff that's in the Goka Gazetteer, and you can just go down to the market, grab some food or something between fights, and maybe that's where you see, I don't know, one of the rival teams or something.
Yeah, and in Goka, I actually did also think about how, in order to not have it be all fights in a row, there are definitely also locations that you can just consider in terms of just going for sightseeing. So there are definitely a few kind of geographical locations that are interesting that you can just go and kind of take in the sites as well. So like up in the north, there's a section called let me check actually. It's called the Ginting and the Heads because it's a bunch of tiny little kind of small islands that are just right off a very sheer cliff. And so it's and in the south section, there's also called a kind of geological formation of basalt columns that is called it's called Shalene's Comb, I believe. And so these are just kind of places that you can kind of unwind a little and just take in the sights and kind of have some time to either just chat in your party or maybe have a couple of NPCs show up to basically interact as well. So these are also kind of opportunities that you can look for and kind of have your party relax a little before going back into the next fight, basically.
Yeah, that's super cool. I like that a lot. Nonat1 has a question. Are there any rules for the bouts, or is it anything goes?
There's and I think it's in the player's guide too, so you can actually check it out if you want to just download the player's guide on Paizo.com. The rules are summarized in a sidebar, and they're very similar to the rules in the original module. If you played that 10 years ago, if you didn't, then it's basically a fight to KO. You could play it a fight to the death, I guess. Just kind of assume that happened. Whatever. It's kind of left the GM in the table in that regard. It's assumed, I think, to be a KO. It's not like you decapitate your foe in the middle of the arena or whatever, unless you want to do that, But then and maybe there's an evil team, maybe that is kind of like that nasty. So, but the rules are, yeah, that'd be. I mean, I would love that. That would be an interesting campaign. The main villains would be like, "Whoa, you got this."
Go down, guys.
yeah, we're gonna hang out with Tino and them. They're pretty chill. You guys, you do you. So the basic rules are fight to KO, last team standing wins, and don't loot the bodies afterward. The treasure and stuff is accounted for in the prizes. It's kind of poor form to loot the bodies of your unconscious rivals. They're gonna wake up and you're gonna have to see them tomorrow in the locker room, and they're gonna be like, you stole my granddad's
sword
amulet. Yeah, you stole my amulet and sword. Yeah.
Give it back.
and that could have ramifications in later bits of this.
Totally. And there's also those exhibition fights that have their own kind of rules. Each of them is like totally different. Yeah.
Some have some really weird ones. So. Shindit Nemo has something here. So I know that this is our 11 to 20, and before that we had Abomination Vaults. So they asked if there's any suggested hooks to connect Abomination Vaults with Ruby Phoenix.
We took that into consideration, and that was definitely something we thought about as we developed both these. It seemed like a natural kind of segue, actually. You become the heroes of the Isle of Kortos, more or less. By the end of Abomination Vaults, you've basically become the local legends, right? But what do you do with that prestige and fame? And the baseline assumption of Ruby Phoenix tournament is that Fist of the Ruby Phoenix is that you got an invitation, right? So Hao Jin hand selected her participating teams. She's like, those people just solved that huge dungeon over on the Isle of Kortos, so I'm going to invite them. They seem like a good fit. And these ones are evil, evil witches who want to destroy the world. I definitely want them too, just to see what happens. So I think it'll be very easy to tie it in. Are there specific tie-ins? Not necessarily. I think we might have thrown in a vague homage or something like that. But the two APs are definitely meant to be played like on their own. Well, they're definitely meant to be played like as able to play on their own. But they're very easy to slide one after the other because you just say you got an invitation because you're hot shots now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that if your characters are 11th level and you're doing a longer thing and you want to shift the tone, just be like, but before you go to the dungeon to do this, you receive an invitation. So it can kind of work in a lot of places. If you want to give like a longer break or something in between a longer campaign.
We have one more question here. Streyu is saying, is there any new equipment or weapons suitable for tournament or kaiju fights? I'm going to actually jump in a little bit first because I have something I was kind of excited about. It's not so much a kaiju fighting weapon, but one thing that I've been talking about a lot is, I'm from Hawaii and I've been trying to put a lot more Hawaiian stuff in lately. And there's this weapon called the Leomano, which is just basically a club that is inset with shark teeth. And I was like, that is a fantasy weapon right there. So there's a number of new kind of basic equipment for this, and a lot of it is, specifically the kind of weapons that you would see in this kind of like tournament thing. So we have those. I think we have hook swords and like windfire wheels. So we have a lot of those, but putting a Leomano in was my favorite. I want to give it the chainsaw rune from Lost Noman's character guide. So
yes, yeah, it's a wild weapon. It's like you said, it kind of looks like a cricket bat or something with a bunch of spikes all over the side, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
They'd usually be shark teeth, but I'm like, this is fantasy. They can be like dragon teeth or something if we need them
Totally.
to be. Yeah. And then there's some cool higher level items, but I'm not quite as familiar with them.
There's as with all adventure paths, there's the adventure toolbox in each volume, and that has new rules for characters who play in the adventure path. And as you go through, you meet characters who can offer to teach you about a certain archetype or whatever, and you'll unlock that archetype. And they're all very much tied into the particular setting where you're at, whether that's Banmu or Goka or wherever the third adventure takes you. There's plenty of new rules, and that'll really tie you into that part of the world for sure.
We actually, Yvonne, ended up. I know you wrote this for Secrets of Magic, but this book wouldn't usually be released by now, so I think I'm okay saying it. But I know you did Fulu Talismans for Secrets of Magic, and I think we took some of those rules and ended up pulling them back into Ready Fight, since obviously this is a place in the world where that kind of thing makes a lot of sense being. If there's anything you could say about maybe your, what you pulled from when you were making those items.
So with Fulu's, this is going to take me a while because it's been a while. And let's see. I believe the one that we included in this one was the Stonebreaker Fulu.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So Fulu's work, they're basically the same as talismans almost in a way, but they work a little differently in that they're easier to apply, basically, in comparison to talismans. Because talismans, you kind of need to do it, if I recall correctly, you need to take an hour outside of combat to use tools to put it on. Whereas Fulu's work a little bit differently in the sense that you can basically slap it on kind of in the middle of battle, almost using an action to quickly basically possibly change the attribute of your armor, your weapon, or your person. And
they're like
however, they also learn just as quickly. Yeah, those are the paper ones.
Yeah. So I was really happy that the kind of timeline worked out, right? That Logan, who was the design lead for this, so I work in design, but I wasn't the design lead for this project, but Logan was, and he was also the design lead for Secrets of Magic. So it was just like a very convenient way that we could kind of move some of that material around.
There's also some good kaiju tie-ins for Secrets of Magic, but I won't say any more. But there's some cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, that I think about wraps it up. Do you
Yeah.
all want to sign off and give your name and where people can find you on social media or whatever? I'm Patrick Reaney. I was the lead developer. Don't look for me on social media. You won't find me. Send me an email.
I'm James Case. I'm a designer, and I was the writer for book 3 of this, King of the Mountain, and my social media handle is in the screen element because it is not say out loudable.
I'm Patrick Hurley. I was the editing lead for the Ruby Phoenix Path, and I'm also a science fiction writer and on the side. And my Twitter handle is my old college email address, sort of Hurlipat.
And Yvonne, as for Twitter, you can find me at SenHHS, which is also the pen name I write under for both Paizo and other stuff.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. And up next, you'll be seeing more of this face as we do an interview with No Direction, as I do an interview with No Direction.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.